if it was, I hope there was a special one in there just for me. Right. Lovely to see some familiar faces and kind of meet some new names and faces and new people. My name is Mohammed Sabsabi. David introduced me as being from the University of Sydney, although I don't have any formal association with the university anymore because I've completed my master's dissertation, but that's where I did complete my degree late last year, but only graduated not so long ago this year. So despite Corona, there was still some sort of ceremony, which was great on campus. My supervisor was Nigel Bagnall. Nigel is normally an attendee of these functions, but I haven't seen him around this year so far. In terms of my own professional context, I teach currently, I'm an academic teacher at Western Sydney University College. I teach in the arts faculty there, and I teach in the space that is part of my research. And so, part of the research will talk about what a pathway program is, and I'm not sure, what your understanding of what that term is and what it means, or, but if I'm, talking, going on too much about it or talking about the obvious, then please feel free to stop me. So my paper is for today is about the voices of higher education pathway students, and the reason why I chose this because it was a key part of my study, and the study focused on the voices of pathway students because a lot of the work in this area is about policies and practices, programs, and discounts, or in many ways ignores the experiences of pathway students. So I'll just share my screen there if that's okay. All right. So hopefully you can still hear me and see my screen at the same time.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you.
We can.
Right. So the title of the, thank you, the title of the dissertation was The Extent to Which a Higher Education Program, which is what HEPP stands for, the acronym, prepares students for university. And it was really an investigation of the promises and the perceptions and the practices, and trying to reconcile what the institution, the higher education institution, said, and this was a particular, well, it was Western Sydney where I teach basically, what they promised to prospective college students, and reconciling how this was received in terms of the students' experiences. So when we talk about a higher education pathway program, it is a generic term, and there are lots of terms that also have a similar meaning, and there are lots of synonyms for higher education pathway programs, and they're sometimes referred to as enabling programs, alternative entry programs, programs for non-traditional students, sub-degree courses, bridging, preparatory or supplementary programs, as well as transition programs. But in terms of intent and purpose, they all mean one and the same thing. And in particular, what they mean is giving students the chance. Many students, and keeping in mind, I teach these students, they often use the phrase or the expression a second chance at gaining entry into university because they didn't meet the traditional requirements of getting the minimum entry mark to gain entry. And whenever we talk about, the purpose of higher education programs, there's always this, dual sort of argument, and they work in a simultaneous way. So they're not mutually exclusive, although that can depend on your school of thought. But there is an egalitarian as well as a, economic or neoliberal dimension to them, depending on who you speak to. But certainly with the participants that participated, or that were involved in my study, they overwhelmingly agree of the personal and social benefits that they derived as a result of the particular pathway program they were enrolled in. Students who normally come to higher education pathway programs are students who have poor prior learning experiences for a whole range of different reasons. So it's not just because they're, for want of a better expression, academically challenged, but sometimes they're carers, sometimes, you know, there's no history, you know, in their family of, you know, role models in their family. The parents question why have they chosen to go to university? What a waste of time that is. So there's a lot of barriers they need to overcome. And they're typically students who, again, first in their family to attend a higher education institution. And you know, this model challenges the traditional method, which I mentioned is, as we all know, based on the mark you typically receive in your final year of high school, which determines the minimum entry requirements for you to get into a university. What makes higher education programs, you know, different to a mainstream degree? Typically, not necessarily, but typically, the course content or the curriculum involves assessments or tasks which are a lot simpler, a lot shorter, with some, you know, meshed into some academic content in a very sort of a not superficial, but a very elementary way. And bolted onto all of that is a range or a suite of services and support around the classroom, even though we're, you know, a lot of sort of virtual these days, but looking beyond the sort of a classroom academic needs of the student and probing and investigating what may be happening or has happened to them outside of the campus and looking for ways to assist with that. So it's a collection of services that come together. And in my experience, these can be done well, but the short story is a lot of these are done in sort of silos or in isolation, as opposed to a part of a broader strategy. So why did I think this was an important study? Now you might think, well, it's obvious. I work in such an environment. I work at a university which has a college campus and offers a pathway program. But believe it or not, this was not the main impetus. It was important, but not the main impetus for me, not the main driver for me for this study. But what I was really trying to find in this study, again, was to move away from just looking at policies and you know, practices and you know, flyers and programs, and really focus on the self-determination of students as identified by the students themselves. Because not whenever, but much of the time, whenever you read about the experiences of students with you know, low socioeconomic backgrounds who come into university, often this is addressed from a deficit perspective, rather than focusing on you know, their sense of resilience or their aspirations or their coping mechanisms and what they need to overcome to achieve you know, successfully attending and passing a university course. So I really wanted to challenge that idea that we ought to focus on the challenges, and I'd rather, you know, the personal study was focused on the aspirations. The other reason why this study was important to me was because I found there was, you know, it's still an emerging area, an emerging discipline, and it's still rather nascent, and I believe there's still a lot of room for better understanding the impacts of higher education programs and ways they can be better applied to attract a wider range of students and do it in a more meaningful way. But the ultimate and the most profound reason why this study was important to me was because higher education programs are a reflection of my own personal experience. I'm in my mid-50s now, you can't tell, but I'm in my mid-50s, and when I went to school, born and raised in Sydney, it's a school called Cogra High School, I was a very poor student. And, I could talk all day about why that was the case, but, there was domestic violence in my household, there was alcoholism, lots of displacement. Maybe I wasn't that smart, I don't know. But I'm someone who got 23%, or the equivalent of 23% in his final year, or final exams of my final year at school. And in those days, there was no way in the world you could get to university. But it just so happened there were emerging policies at the time, the Dawkins reforms of the 1980s, that I knew nothing about. But simply by picking up the phone and making inquiries, I found out I was able to transition from a diploma in social welfare at a TAFE college to an arts degree at the University of New South Wales, and this was without even finishing my diploma. Much to my shock and horror. And I guess a lot of that stigma still carries with me today, hence my nervousness in presenting my paper today. But it's so I'm really a beneficiary of these reforms, as well as a witness to them in terms of my teaching capacity at Western Sydney University. And I don't want to go into in depth into the sort of historical context, but just quickly, Australia in particular, and I'd love to know about other contexts on a different occasion, but Australia in particular has a long history of increasing access to higher education for both domestic and international students, and this was particularly intensified during and post World War, the World War era. So in particular, the Colombo Plan of the 1950s, so again, not here for a history lesson, but just to a summary of the key reforms within the Australian context. In the 60s, a Liberal Menzies government gave scholarships to both gifted students as well as students from disadvantaged backgrounds. In the 70s, the Labor Whitlam government made university courses free to all, and ironically, it was the same government who withdrew that and started charging university fees. And in the 1980s, there were a series of policy papers when that really intensified some of or massified the access to education under a program called the Fair Chance for All. So that was a policy designed in 1989, but rolled out during the 90s. And in the most recent and and one of the most significant is in 2008, the review of Australian higher education, which advocated for a demand-driven funding model, which is basically said, universities were allowed to enroll students as they, based on demand, they thought demand that was available in their locality, as opposed to being dictated to based on government quotas. So all of these changes have presented, that have led to, or have been designed around widening access, have led to pressures on universities as they, struggle to cope with, their research arm and focusing increasingly on the teaching aspect of a broader range of learners, and these learners increasingly coming to universities with quite intensive learning support needs, and many universities are not able to cope with that. My particular study was an inductive study, the qualitative research using semi-structured interviews. There were 10 participants. They were all from the same university, but different campuses. They came from different faculties, such as arts, business, health science, and social science. I would have preferred a broader range, access to the data, even though I'm an employee at the university, but it was very difficult getting access to students.
Sorry, Mohammed.
Are you with me?
Sorry to interrupt, Mohammed. We've just, I'm not sure whether you saw the signs, but we've come to the 15 minutes. we'll give you another, is 2 minutes okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I didn't see the sign. I'm sorry, David.
All good. Thank you, Mohammed.
So the framework was Pierre Bourdieu's social capital theory, because that has a lot of content around agency related to the relation between power and education. The data analysis model was the 6 Phases Guide to Thematic Analysis by Braun and Clark, highly recommended. And the great thing for me is in that particular model, it gave me lots of applied information or feedback that I could potentially use, and I'm using that because I'm sitting on a couple of committees at Western Sydney where I teach and provide a lot of that feedback. The key findings that higher education programs work based on the feedback given by the participants. 10 out of 10 participants said they don't regret, and it was, it was a great thing for them. But 9 out of 10 contrastingly said it could have been better. It could have been better. The key themes were related to stigma, engagement, academic support, and the role of academic teachers. And again, what that meant for different students was different. It wasn't unanimous. But the stigma was probably a very strong one. There was a strong sense of self-doubt. I would have liked to have a larger sample size in the study. I would have liked more cooperation from Western Sydney in terms of some of the data they use to incorporate it to my data. And I think it would also be useful to try and speak to students who started a higher education pathway program but didn't quite finish it to see why it didn't work for them. I did have a little video which I won't play for you, but I will put into the chat box. And the reason why I love this video, it's only a couple of minutes, but it does summarize, I guess, my feelings or attitude towards our education pathways, which is it's great to give students a place and opportunity for further learning, but we also need to give them a space. And this is a reference to the work of Trevor Gale. So, and space meaning we need to better understand their unique and individual aspirations to make the whole experience more meaningful and more rewarding for them. So thank you for your attention, and I'll put that link to you in the chat box shortly. Thank you so much.
Hello, Peter Mohammed. I apologize for interrupting your talk there. I'm sure the audience will come back to and have.
Not at all. Not at all. No, sorry for going over time. It's one of those things you think, oh, I don't have enough, and then you always end up with too much, don't you? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, good. We're going to go across to, again, thank you, Mohammed, and we will have questions for Mohammed during our Q&A. We're going to go across now to our second speaker, and if I can ask the speakers to pin me, that's as much as I know about Zoom, if you can pin me. And then I will, so that you will see the signs as we put it up. Thank you. We're going to go across to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Tepora Wright from the University of Waikato. Her presentation is an analysis of reflexivity in higher education quality assurance in Samoa. Whawhetai lawa, Tepora.
Thank you, David. And you have been pinned. All right, I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. And while that comes up, as David has said, I'm a PhD student studying at the University of Waikato. I am in the second year of my PhD. Prior to that, I was working I'm a qualified teacher by profession, and then worked for a quality assurance body for 8 years, and then worked for a university in administration and quality assurance for several years as well, before deciding that it was time to have a break from a full-time job and to pursue PhD study. So without further ado, I will go into it and just explain terminology along the way. So quality assurance A policy really just basically refers to policies that are used to monitor or to evaluate the quality of higher education programs. And usually when people hear those words, they think of things like accreditation, external reviews, external evaluation, self-reviews, performance assessment, all those things that have to do with monitoring the quality of higher education programs and what is offered at universities. And this presentation today focuses on one aspect of my research, which is, so for this presentation, I'll just be looking at the angle, through the angle of reflexivity, to analyze some of the data from 41 Telenor interviews, Telenor conversations that I carried out with different stakeholders in higher education quality assurance policy in Samoa. So the main question that I want to focus on in the next few minutes is, how do individual policy actors respond to higher education QA policy? And when I say policy actors, I'm referring to people that have been involved in either developing or making decisions or enacting QA policy. And in this group, there are different individuals, all, operating through different lenses, but all in the same space of higher education QA. So example of policy actors refer to external QA staff. So these are the people who basically enact the QA policy across a national level or regional level. Also internal QA staff, referring to staff that deal with this, but within the institutions themselves. Most universities and institutions of higher education at this point, at this time, have units that deal with academic quality. And you might find them in the planning division or in academic quality division, just depends on the configuration, but they will be there. And then you also have academics who are focused on teaching and learning and research every day. Sector governance, this refers to people with the ministerial portfolios, that includes education, also heads of agencies, and then also the stakeholders, or what people like to refer to as the stakeholders. So this refers to employers of graduates, students and parents themselves, and the community. So I mentioned before that I'll be using the angle of reflexivity to look through my data. I'm just going to spend a few minutes, or 1 or 2 minutes, talking about Archer's mode of reflexivity, which is what I'm using to as a lens for my data. So basically, Archer referred to or proposed identified 4 modes of reflexivity that people engage in when they have their internal conversations. And the thing here is that almost everyone engages in some kind of reflexivity. When you're thinking your own internal conversations that you're having with yourself. And some of the synonyms that are used are in inner dialogue, internal musings, thinking things through. Also, the Samoan word for my Samoan research context, manatunatu. And if anyone else would like to offer alternative translations, I'm open to that as well. And these are the conversations we have with ourselves about the situations in which we find ourselves. And it helps us decide what to do about it, how we respond. So autonomous reflexivity basically refers to internal conversations in which you make the decision based on what you think. And this leads directly to action. You decide to act based on what you think without the need to consult anyone else. Communicative reflexivity, conversations that you might have about an issue or problem in front of you, but you need this to be confirmed by someone else before you can act. Meta-reflexivity, this is a mode of reflexivity in which you think about your own thinking For example, you might ask questions, well, why did I do that? Why did I think that? Why did I respond this way? So when you do that, you're engaging in meta reflexivity. And the last one, fractured reflexivity. This kind of internal conversation bring to the fore your own internal distress, or it might be disorientation with what's going on. You're not sure what to do, and distrust of basically everything. And the thing is that most people engage in one form or another of these types throughout their lives, and possibly throughout their day. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, now there were several themes that came through my data, but I'm only going to talk about two today. And the first one is credibility of the QA system. So this is a theme that came through in the conversations that I had with my research participants. So I looked through and tried to analyze this and see how the data looks like if I categorize them according to the modes of reflection. And these are the kinds of sayings or reflections that came through. And it was surprising that it was very helpful to use the reflexivity modes to see the different kinds of thinking and the different kinds of responses that people were taking in response to higher education quality assurance policy. And I also want to say, while you're reading through the various quotes, that it wasn't, there was no specific, say, tendency of one particular group in one particular method, reflexivity method. For example, QA staff as well as academics all experienced the 4 modes of reflexivity regarding the same issue. So I'll just briefly go through some of these things and just to explain a bit more about what it tells us about how people are responding to the situation in which they find themselves of being given or being informed of a quality assurance policy that they have to implement or have been implementing for a while. So we'll start with autonomous reflectives. Obviously, this one, they don't seem to have a problem figuring out how to respond or what to do. They either do it or don't do it. So they either resist or, as in do their own thing in spite of the policy, or decide to go along with it, or disengage. So as you can see, the first speaker there, the first participant, very confident in what they're doing. They don't need to consult everyone else. They worked out that the policy is correct, and so they're going to follow it. The second 2 participants, second and third, as you can see, they've realized that they don't like a whole lot about the policy and the idea of it, of accreditation or of external regulators, and that determines how they act. So their thinking determines how they're acting. In terms of the communicative reflexives, this is an example. So they're thinking that they want to respond, but they, in terms of what the external QA body might be saying about a particular program or course, but they know they need to consult with themselves, with each other, with their team. The meta-reflexive on the bottom left-hand side. And this is interesting because this is someone who is able to stand back and just look at what's happening at a meta level. So a senior academic sat at the table, etc. The regulators had a young staff. This person thinks it should have been us to cut a bit of slack, give them some leeway, but at the same time, so it's recognizing the 2 different approaches and 2 different sides, and this person, this kind of thinking enables you to stand back and just think at a mental level of the issue. And then a fractured reflexivity example. This person is going through a bit of frustration, or not a bit, a lot of frustration, you know, asking so many questions. What's the whole point? What is the outcome? And it is often that people who are engaging in this kind of thinking, they find themselves unable to act in one particular way. And so they might withdraw from the whole process, not giving either way. Okay, so that's under the theme of credibility of the QA system. And the whole point about this is that there's these 4 different kinds of reflexivity were exhibited by everyone in the different policy actor groups. So there wasn't a particular tendency of one group towards a particular kind of thinking. So that's interesting. All right, there was also a theme coming through of conflicting views and how to deal with conflicting views. So, and different people responded differently. For the autonomous reflexive, it didn't matter what was going on. It didn't matter what the conflicting views were. This person was set. I will do this, and I will do it because I think this is the best thing to do. The communicative reflexive wants more consultation, wants to know if there has been contextualizing for the policy to fit the context. And they're not going to make a decision until they satisfy themselves that that process has been followed. Meta-reflexives, again, looking at the conflict from a distance, or able to be impartial, and says that it's not an us versus them. It's not them versus us. It should be all of us, period. And this kind of thinking resonates with the context, with the particular cultural context in which I did my study, because where relationality is valued and consensus, and also working together, tala noa, to find a common solution. And then lastly, which is also, which is something that could be a cause of concern, fractured reflexive are stressed out, very distressed about, you know, they feel they're being used as a guinea pig. Why are we doing this again? So much stress. Now we're repeating the work. And it is very difficult for people who are engaging in this thinking, because they just can't help it, and they don't see a way out easily, or they don't see a way forward easily. Okay, to round this off, so that was a snapshot of the themes that came through, and an example of how I've used modes of reflexivity to analyze the responses to policy in this context. So why is this kind of analysis important? Because policy is always about change, and individuals respond in different ways. And sometimes, well, I'm arguing that it may be the case that we need to look closer at how we develop and enact the policy, the processes around it, instead of just saying that the people are the problem. You know, the people are the problem. It's so and so is the problem. You know, we need to ask that question again, especially for individuals that might be going through fractured reflexivity, because they are very distressed and are not going to easily find their way out without support. So it's important that concern is there. And the other reason why it's important is because in a constantly unpredictable world, we do need to recognize the need for resilience. And I will end with a reflection question. I know you might want to ask me questions later, but I also want to leave you with a question, which is reflecting on a policy that you might have developed or enacted in the context of your own work. What type of reflexivity were you comfortable with? Thank you for your time.
You can see the virtual claps on the screen.
And hear them.
Any questions that people have, there will be time at the end during our Q&A. We're going to move to our final presenter today, Sonia Simoes. Sonia, apologies if I mispronounce your last name. And Sonia is going to talk about international scholarships for higher education in Timor-Leste. aiding development, or exacerbating social inequalities. Malo, Sonia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Sonia Simoes from Timor-Leste. And I would like to ask Sonia Fonua to share my screen first. Thank you very much. So I first of all want to thank OCIES for giving me this opportunity to share about my MA thesis, not only to my fellow Timorese attending this conference, but also to a wider audience from many countries. So thank you very much. I recently finished my master's degree in the University of East Anglia in the UK through Chevening Scholarship Program. And I currently work as an education program coordinator at Katapa International in Dili, Timor-Leste. Next slide, please. So before I go on to talk about my research findings, methodology, etc., I would just like to mention two reasons why I chose this topic. So the first topic is because of my personal experience and observation with international scholarship programs. So I was awarded 2 scholarship programs, first for my undergrad degree by the South Korean government, and then the second for my master's from the UK government. And by personal observations here, I mean, because when I come back from my studies abroad, I joined a lot of youth activities and events in Dili, the capital city. Around the country, I see so many faces, so many people who graduated abroad as well. And I was always very curious to ask about the backgrounds of people who studied abroad. And that got me thinking that I should do this research, because so far, there is no in-depth research about the socioeconomic background of international scholarship recipients. Next. And this is just to show faces of me and my friends who got the scholarship last year to study in the UK. Next. And before I go on again to talk about my thesis, just a brief introduction about Timor-Leste. So to the audience who don't know about my country, so Timor-Leste is a tiny island. It's another word for Timor-Leste is East Timor, but right now we use Timor-Leste as the official name. We are located in between Indonesia and Australia, and Timor only has about 1.3 million population, and Timor-Leste also has one of the youngest population in the world. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of history, Timor was colonized by Portuguese for almost 5 centuries. And then after that, we were invaded and occupied by the Indonesian military for 24 years. And after we went through a transitional period under the UN for about 3 years, until we finally gained independence in May 2000, officially gained independence in May 2002. And Timor-Leste is mainly an agrarian society. We have 60 to 70% of our working population working as farmers, and our office and formal workers mainly work and reside in Dili. And just to mention that after independence, yes, there are some improvements in infrastructure in terms of roads, mobile internet connectivity, and electricity. However, there are big challenges remain in malnutrition, agricultural productivity, fiscal sustainability, and basic services, including health and education. Next slide. And talking about the state of education in Timor-Leste, every year my government says that education is one of the top priorities. However, allocations, state budget allocation for education is always 10% or less than 10% every year. And we have many deficiencies for lack of school buildings, lack of facilities and equipment, teacher training, absenteeism, etc. And just to talk about the scholarship for higher education abroad, since independence, we have received scholarship programs from many developed countries, including some from international agencies. However, so far, as I mentioned earlier, there's no research talking about background, the characteristic or features of international scholarship recipients in Timor-Leste, which is why I would like to talk about this issue. I research about this issue. Next. So when I began my research, I have this hypothesis that international scholarship programs play a critical role in producing and reproducing class inequalities in Timor-Leste through two main ways. First is for those with pre-existing capital, so economic, social, and cultural. I will explain those terms later. And only those who can mostly access scholarship programs more easily, while majority of Timorese is excluded. And that by accessing international education, recipients increase their capital by securing higher earning capacity and improve their social networks. Next. And these are my three research questions. So first, to what degree can socioeconomic inequality be seen among scholarship recipients compared to the general population, both before and after? And I compare the data through an online survey I did with the international recipients with the DHS Demographic Health Survey in Timor-Leste 2016 and also Census 2015. And the second question, to what degree does higher socioeconomic status enable receiving scholarship, and to what degree does receiving international scholarship enable achieving higher economic status following graduation? And the third question is what role do international higher education scholarship programs play in class formation in Timor-Leste? Next. And what I mean by class formation here, just to mention briefly, that it is a process where socioeconomic differentiation occurs between groups in society, which come from changes in the basic production and material condition. And what I mean about the basic production here is the economic system, or how wealth is produced. And so, for example, you have a peasant agrarian society moving to an industrialized urban society. Next. And so the main theory I use for my research is a theory of capital by Pierre Bourdieu. And he, for him, there's three types of capital: economic, cultural, and social. And Bourdieu refers to capital as materials, knowledge, or ideas to produce, transfer, or create and change commodities with a reason to accumulate more wealth, which then benefits one person or a group. And the examples for economic capital is money or assets. It can be house, land, vehicle, etc. And the cultural can be qualifications, skills, and knowledge. And the social is the actual and potential research in the forms of family or social connection which supports someone to keep or attain higher status. Next. And this is my research design. So I use primary research and also secondary research. And because at the time I was still in the UK doing my research, I could not travel to Dili, to Timor-Leste, so I did an online survey using Google Forms. I first approached my survey respondents through Facebook, through my networks, and then I rely on snowball effects to gain more respondents. So I had about 109 survey respondents. And the questions I chose for the survey was to measure the forms of capital among scholarship recipients. So including their parents' education, their household assets, their high school type and location, their salary post-graduation, and also their time from when graduating to employment. So there was 3 sections: pre-scholarship, and then a question about their study, and also post-graduation. And my secondary research is through academic articles about Timor-Leste and other countries. I also use Timor-Leste government documents and some reports from international agencies and NGOs working in Timor-Leste. Next. So just to share now some of my findings, I will be sharing about 5 of them, not all because there are many. The first one here is about the high school type of international scholarship recipients. And as you can see very clearly, everyone responded to this question. And if you put together people who studied in private school in Timor and abroad, plus who studied in international school, you will have a total of 81% graduated from private school and international schools. And while there is no research available between in-depth research between quality of public school and private schools in Timor-Leste, private schools are generally attended by majority of children of wealthier citizens. And while public schools are often lower quality and attended by majority of poor people, especially in global south countries, for this reason, my survey results appear to support the view that children from wealthier citizens can afford to send their children to private schools and are more likely to obtain international scholarship than the majority of poorer citizens. As you can see here, only 18.3% of international scholarship recipients who came from, who studied in Timor-Leste government schools. Next. And this is about the high school location as well. So as you can see here, more than half of international scholarship recipients went to high schools in Dili, and only around 7.3 of the survey respondents went to schools in rural towns and rural village in Timor-Leste. Next one. And this is about the household possessions pre-international education with the DHS 2016 demographic health survey. From here, you can, the results here indicates that respondents' family own more household possessions such as electronics and vehicles than the average Timorese family when compared to the demographic health survey. At the end there, you have farm animals, and that is very clear because most of these scholarship recipients, they reside in Dili. So usually people who reside in the districts own more farms. Next one. And this is talking about monthly salary of scholarship recipients post their graduation. You can see the dark blue there with only 3.6 of the respondents reported earning less than $500 per month. I wanted to find out about this because the minimum wage in Timor is only $115, 115 per month. Also, most government staffs who don't have position as advisors or in senior level, they usually earns below 500, except for some profession like in the medical doctors. So this is clear that international education really helps people to gain more salary than many Timorese. Next. And this is time from graduation to employment. Here, the graph shows very clear as well that more than half, 67% of respondents got their first employment after their graduation within 3 months. Even though Timor-Leste has very high rates of youth unemployment. Thus, the result here indicate that Timorese with international education tend to experience unemployment at lower rates than average Timorese. And just to share one of my experience as well, after graduating from a university in South Korea, I got my first employment within a month. And that is because I studied in Korea, I speak Korean, and I work for one of the international agency, KOICA, in Timor-Leste. Next. So my conclusion is that the majority of scholarship recipients resides in urban areas. They attended private high schools with advantageous socioeconomic background. And majority of survey participants, they confirm in one of the open-ended questions that their socioeconomic status improved significantly after completing their international education. Meanwhile, quality of education, employment opportunities, and earning capacity remains very limited for the majority of Timorese people. And all the conclusion lead to my hypothesis. I had prior to writing this research. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So this is my email, my personal email and my work email. In case you want to read my thesis, I can send it to you. Thank you very much.
Malogita Sonia, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We just want to thank all three of our presenters for sharing their insights today. We're now going to move into Q&A, and I'll hand it over to Sonia to guide our Q&A. Hello?
Sonia Fonua.
Sonia Fonua, sorry.
No surprise, it's your turn, Sonia. You have to, because you went third. This is nerve. We're practicing. No, jokes. Yes, so now it's question time. I think we finish at I was going to say 15 past, quarter past. Is that correct? Yeah. Has anyone got a burning question that they would like to kick us off with?
Latu has a question.
Oh, sorry, Latu, would you like to go?
Yeah, if there's no one is ready.
You are ready, so we would like to hear.
Thank you to all the presenters who have shared their initial findings with us. By the way, I'm Latu from Waikato University. I don't have a question, rather a comment or suggestion, and if I may, particularly to Tepora's presentation. Malo lava whaftaitele mo saunanga malie. Utafia whale ali ni fua I lau ngiangi. Patau pou moana. I wish to acknowledge and applaud Tea's courage in trying to incorporate your native tongue in your research. For example, the use of the Samoan term mana tunatu as a Samoan translation for reflexivity. Mana tunatu, I think is the right word. But alternatively, I would like to suggest another word, probably tofa fitu'nai or muniao fitu'nai. It has a history and it's originated from a cultural perspective of Seungalupe. So that is where I'm coming from. And actually my alternative terminologies that I'm suggesting, tofa fitu'nai and muniao fitu'nai, based on the epistemological perspective grounded on the sociological understanding of reflexivity and relationship between cause and effect. So that is where I'm thinking, I'm coming from and trying to think of those terms, muniao fitu'nai and tofa fitu'nai. I think a part of it is, my suggestion is to decolonizing our research, terminologies, foreign concepts that we are using. And there is a sense of that decolonizing part of in your research. So I'm encouraging you to use more, and I wish to see more of that in your research. And also, lastly, I wish to remind us that this is the Oceania thing, but that's another challenge for us. If we can reorient our own terminology, like moana, it's our native language, common in the Pacific, most of the Pacific. If that is the word referring to us as specific people, and I challenge us all, if there's a way that we can kind of, as reflected in that team Pacific moana, they played, though they lost last week. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for the opportunity. Have tight.
I've got a question, Sonia. It's for the third presenter. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful, and it really touched my heart. Your really beautiful treatment of equality, and I love your research. And I wondered what next.
Thank you.
What next for you? That's my question. What next for your research and for your fabulous for your fabulous masters. What's next?
Can I answer directly? Oh, okay, cool. What's next? Okay. So I'm currently just working at one of the international organizations in Timor, but in the future, after this research, I would like to dig more, because right now I only have 109 international scholarship recipients participating in my survey. So I would love to know a bigger number, even though I feel like the differences won't be much. It will still be similar, but I feel like for people to really understand the inequality in accessing these programs and inequality of in education quality, people need to see more evidence. For my government to really act in bettering this education system in Timor-Leste, they need to see more evidences through research such as this. So in the future, I would love to do more research in regards to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions for you in the chat as well, Sonia, around who is receiving scholarships and some changes around that. So I'm not sure if you've read these. I can read it to you. So Dr. Helen Hill has asked if what you think of the Australian government's policy of cutting out scholarships for undergrads, except for those with disabilities, and focusing purely on postgraduate. Do you think there's much difference between undergraduate and postgraduate students?
I think the issue here is very structural. So it doesn't matter whether you only focusing on people with disability. If people with disability, but they went to a really good school, and there's still some inequality there, right? And even whether it is focusing on postgraduate or not, there's still, my issue here is the inequality, the structural inequalities here. So for this to really change, my government really needs to invest a lot in our public education. And then we can talk about other issues in the future, which one to prioritize first, right? So that is all I can say for now.
Would you
Another
like
question.
your follow-up question then? So the next follow-up question.
This is my colleague.
Yeah, just based on the questions.
This is my colleague from the CALPA as well. Yeah, would I recommend donors offering scholarship to prioritize scholarship to students with lower quantile of income to close inequality? Yeah, that is one way. That is one way to solving what I brought up, the issue that I brought up. But again, this will not be enough. The action needs to come from the government a lot to change inequality here. This is just one way. That is what I can say.
Thank you, Sonia. I was just going to make a quick comment about yours. There was a recent analysis done around scholarships at I work at the University of Auckland, and who's receiving the scholarships that come here. And I guess similarly, most of the scholarships were being awarded to students that were attending the good schools. Don't worry about the system we use to name it here. But it wasn't just that, it was actually the size of the scholarship was very different. So people going to these better schools were also receiving more money, bigger scholarships than students that were attending, I guess, the lower way of quantifying the schools. So there's different ways to offer things, but also not offer them in an equitable way. Before drilling into you, I wanted to ask Mohammed a question, if that's all right. Sorry, Miriam, I'm jumping the gun. I've been working in foundation for a really long time myself, and it's a really important sector, which is often very undervalued. So I hear everything that you're saying, and I sympathise entirely. It's very valuable, but yes, I was really interested in the fact that all of your students said that it was really useful, but what would it have been that would have made it better? The 9 that said they wanted it better, what was that?
It wasn't any one thing, but it was a suite of or collection of feedback. One of the biggest I guess, components of that was feedback at the outset, at the very beginning, because a lot of these students come to these programs by referral from a teacher or a careers advisor or an elder sibling or someone in the community. So they just do it because they, their social networks are so limited and they don't have any other option. Or sometimes some, fantastic direct emotional response marketing from the university. So they roll in courses like business or construction or teaching without having never thought about the possibility of being an engineer or a teacher or whatever it is. And they only accept the courses because they had the offer, not because it's necessarily aligned with their aspiration or passion or interest. So they were saying, I wish there was someone there at the outset. It's great that I got a place, but I wish I could have spoken to someone who could have advised me about what other possibilities were available to me rather than just place me in this particular course because there happened to be a vacancy. They spoke a lot about some of the extracurricular activities and, in terms of, the clubs and the associations. They spoke about the need to have career guidance and career counselling, for example. They spoke about the need to have to extend their relationship, I'm not sure how this would happen, or the ethics around it, but extend their relationship with their teachers beyond the classroom, because they've said that it was a valuable part of their journey, but what else could have been made available to them? So there was a whole collection there. And way too many to kind of list here, but these were some of the key ones for sure.
I look forward to further conversations around this. Sarah's nodding as well. Does anyone have any last real quick questions? We've got 2 minutes, which we also have to do our quick wrap up stuff as well. Burning questions? Bex does. Oh, and Miriam, sorry.
Sorry, very quick question. Thank you all to all the presenters, because they were great presentations and I have lots of questions. But Tepora, I'm just keen to know, I think I heard that you said you did 40 Talanoa interviews, conversations. Just how did you manage that amount of data? Because that's something I'm struggling with right now. It seems like a lot of data to manage. So I'm just interested how you managed it and analysed it, I guess. Thanks.
Yes, that is the key question at this point in time. So I'm still in the process of finalizing my data analysis management approach. And in actual fact, I've gone through, I think this is the 3rd phase, I would say, so the first thing I did, got all my data together and then did a general thematic analysis. And then because there were, different things happening, other presentations and papers, so then I've actually started analyzing my data in terms of the different questions I was looking at. So for this particular question, I just analyzed it using the modes of reflexivity. But for other things that I was looking at, the others would know who have listened to some other presentations, I used Bourdieu to look at how the fields, like how QA is a field in itself, in conflict with the field of higher education. So just using different tools. And my supervisors say that I do have too much data, so I haven't finished that process. So I hope it all makes complete sense in the next few months.
Miriam, did you want to quickly ask? I totally recognise we've gone over time, but if we've
mine wasn't so much a question as more just a comment about your work, Tepora. Just to thank you that you've given me a new piece of information. We use critical reflections as part of the assessment tasks in the courses that I teach, and you give me a new way of explaining and thinking about thinking, and I'm going to be spending some time in that space and learning and maybe implementing that with my first years, because I think that's really important that you've given them tools, to be able to work out why they're reacting or feeling or justifying their own reflexivity. So thank you.
I would like to thank our wonderful presenters and all the hard work and emotion that they put into not only their work, but their preparing for this today and the actual event. And also I'd like to thank everyone that helped put together this session. And also I'd like to acknowledge Bex for supporting us as co-president of OCIES, a new and emerging researcher herself. So here she is, holding multiple things going on. And we do have another session tomorrow, which I think is, correct me, 4 o'clock New Zealand time, 2 o'clock Australia time. Looking for the nod from Ben for this. Yeah, I got a clap from Miriam, so we're good. And then we have another session on Friday. So we've got lots of opportunities to reconnect again in this space. If you're wanting to hear more about what new and emerging researchers are doing, we'd love to have you come to the session and spend more time together. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, life, morning, afternoon period of time that you function within. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, Sonia, Rebecca, David, and anyone else who was part of the whole support process. So really helpful. Thank you.
You did really well.
My pleasure. Well done.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Right.
That was the presentation I had planned, not planned, I hadn't prepared it then, but it was for Samoa last year, but didn't quite happen, did it?
No.
And we all said, that's okay, don't worry about 2019, we'll meet up in 2020, and who would have thought?
So true.
Very true.
So who knows what 2021 has. Yeah, let's hope we can catch up face to face there.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Mohammed. It was great.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Well
Take care.
done, Mohammed and Sonia.
All right, thank you.
That's
Likewise.
great.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, Sonia, I did see you.
Likewise.
Great job. Great research. Looking forward to hearing more.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Guys.
Let me know.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Leave meetings.
Staying, Ben? You're muted.
Just dancing. All right. So I saved the chat. I saved the recording.